Hi students, so in this video I want to do three things. First, I want to give a quick review of what I discussed in class and talk about the various options for structuring your literature review. Then we're going to discuss note-taking strategies, and I'll give you a little how-to on how to use Google Scholar. You'll need all of this information to complete these, to get a good start on this assignment and to complete what you need to do for Friday. So as we discussed in class, all of these literature reviews, and as you're reading the samples that I gave you, look closely at how they're organized, how they're structured. Most of them begin with one or two paragraphs on importance or significance. And then they move into broad statements about status quo. And they'll have things like multiple studies, prior research, many studies. We'll talk about areas of agreement, or things that lots of researchers had done. Then we'll probably talk about gaps within these broad statements of the status quo. And these gaps will lead to a more narrow or specific statements of status quo. Here's where we might get to specific studies and what they show, and then we move to really specific statements of the gap, and then fill the gap. And you're filling a very specific gap in the research. Now, in the examples we looked at in class, they used lots of subheadings to do that. They had a heading for introduction, subheadings for different types of research. So in the one in video acceleration, we had a subheading, I think, just on topic area, like science, and then one on engineering. That is one way to organize it, but we can also organize it. We can also have the whole literature review just one section, one introductory section. Let me show you some examples. So here on the screen, we have one of the note-taking articles, and if we look at this, we can see that just has one long introduction section that isn't broken up to subheadings. Matter of fact, they didn't even bother with the introduction heading, which is unusual. I would probably add introduction here, but it's okay because we know that that's what it starts. And if you look at the structure here, it begins with a statement that it's controversial, which is a good reason for why we should study it. And they go just as the we're talking about in class. They talk about broad areas of agreement, broad areas where the research has been done, and problems with those, gaps with those. And where they end up is talking about specific studies. There's been little research directly addressing differences in laptop versus longhand. And existing studies don't allow for natural variation. For example, and we see here they start talking about individual studies, and we get very close to the specific gap that this study is doing. Notice that they do this all in one area, all in one section. They don't divide it up into subheadings. And in the other sets, if you are doing the breakfast topic, Dayfeder is an example where it just has the introduction all one section, whereas some of the other ones have the introduction broken up into subheadings. And if you are doing sleep, Tavernier and Willoughby have the introduction all one section. So those are some examples that you can look at. But whether you break up your introduction into subheadings or you make it just one section that goes on for a page and a half, 2 pages, you still want to be moving from very broad statements to more specific statements of the specific gap that your study will fill. Now, in order to figure out these gaps, when you look at how do the studies that I'm citing, How do they fill the gaps? What kind of gaps are they noticing? You'll notice a lot of gaps on the context, how things were studied. Additional questions we might have. For instance, there's been a lot of research on note-taking in the classroom, but a lot of it was done before laptops were common. So how does that make a difference, for instance? So look at the different ways that these studies are suggesting the gap and structure your notes so that you are pointing out similar things. So when you are taking your notes, you want to really be preparing the way to do some knowledge transforming. So you might cite the source and then say something, look at the strengths, maybe look at the overall findings, the strengths. Whoops, that should be strengths. I'm tired today, so I have no language. Weaknesses. Good questions. Unstudied areas. Use these to kind of help guide your reading, and try to put it all on one page where you can list all of the articles that you're looking at in one place so you can start seeing connections. And you might do a second layer of note taking. As a matter of fact, stronger writers often spend a lot of time upfront planning. I was talking with one student who said, yeah, about 80% of her time she spends planning, really kind of focusing, figuring out what the commonalities are, what she wants to say. And then when she gets to the writing, that's really about 20% left of what she has to do. That also corresponds with my own writing process. I spend a lot of time planning things, and by the time I get ready to write, I kind of know what I want to say, and it's fairly clear. So I want you to experiment with spending some time planning, and we're going to be sharing notes in class. So I want you to see different ways that your classmates took notes, what they enabled them, and how they're using those notes to articulate gaps and questions that they might want to propose as a future research study. Okay, so how are you going to choose some good articles? Good way to do it is figure out what you're interested in. Start with the three that you've been given and see what's maybe most interesting. So for instance, on the research on sleep, this is the study that probably most caught my eye that's talking about how morning and evening types of people process sleep differently, and tries to look at differences in sleep by examining individual differences within these groups. And so I really like this morning evening. I'm very much an evening person, and I'm somewhat resentful of people who can be really chipper and in a good mood early in the morning. I'm kind of jealous of it. So, and I'm really and I feel like the world's kind of biased towards people who do well in the morning. So this is a particular interest to me. So the first thing I might want to do is, this study was conducted in 2013. I might want to know what other research has been done on this topic since 2013 that cites this study. So I'm going to copy the title and authors here and look it up in Google Scholar and see who has cited this, who has done new research that builds on top of this one. And this is the way to find the most current and effective, most current research on a topic in a field. So now I'm going to go to Google Scholar after copying this. Google Scholar is a particular subset of Google that just contains peer-reviewed articles and links to some books. So that means that it's academic articles. Peer-reviewed means that these have been read by experts in the field who have given a judgment, said this is worthy to be published in this journal. So this is a really good way to find citations when you are doing work in the classroom. To get to Google Scholar, you go to scholar.google.com, and we get a particular version here, Google Scholar. Now, when you first go to Google Scholar, the first thing you should do is link it up to CMU's library. Because if CMU's library owns a text, you can just click on it and access it directly from Google Scholar. So to do that, you want to go to this thing here, I don't even know what they call them, to the gear icon here, and click on Library Links. Here, you'll search for Carnegie Mellon. And we will click on, I don't know why they're two, but I guess I'll go ahead and click on two here. This links up Google Scholar to CMU's library. This can save you a lot of time in finding sources. Now what I'm going to do is copy and paste the article that I just had up. This was the one in the sleep studies that I was most interested in. I have the title here and the author's name here, and I'm going to search for it on Google Scholar. Here's this study here. Now, one thing that I want you guys to note is this quotation mark right here. If I click on this formats it for my works cited. So here it is in MLA format. If I want to do my works cited in MLA format, here it is in APA format. It doesn't have examples of one of the numbered ones, but you can look up online how to do that and how to do IEEE style or Council Biology Editor style. So this is also a very useful shortcut for formatting things in your works cited. Now I want you to notice right here, cited by 32. That means that 32 studies conducted since 2014 have cited this. This is a good way to find really recent research on this. So these are all the studies that have been done that cited it since 2014. You can see that some of these I can get directly by going to a PDF. This full text at my library. If you are on campus, it will take you directly to the article PDF, the article citation here. Oh, this is interesting. It's talking about alcohol use and how that contributes to sleep. Maybe I'm interested in pursuing that. Here we have internet addiction and its relationship with insomnia. That's really interesting. I don't know if the other studies have looked too much at screens, for instance, and how that variable plays out in respect to other ones. And we can see we get just a very interesting use and sort of sense of what the different topics are. Here we have with physical activity. So we can look at these different studies and then maybe pick one or two that we want to use for the additional 2 citations here. Let's say I've decided that I'm really interested in, say, internet use. So one thing that I can do is find within the articles that have cited, so within the 32 articles that cited the Tavernier-Willoughby article, I'm going to look for internet use and search within those. Now I have 6 of these that look specifically at internet use. So we can kind of narrow things down to find specific articles that might be of interest. The other way that you might find articles of interest is if, as you are reading the literature review in one of these studies, you might find a particular study that they mention in passing that you think sounds really interesting. Then you can go ahead and look up that study in Google Scholar, see if you can find it, and use that study to help you articulate your gap. So we've talked about structure, about note-taking, and how to find things within Google Scholar. For next class, I'm going to ask you to turn in a copy of your notes. If you take it on computer, you can just upload a file. If you take notes by hand, then I'll ask you to take a picture of them. I want to see your note-taking strategies, and we're going to compare some note-taking strategies in class and maybe see if your peers have some ways of taking notes that seem particularly useful that you might want to borrow, because part of this is figuring out the process of how to do it. This assignment, you just have to find 5 articles, or you just have to use 5 articles. You only have to find 2 on your own. And they're on topics that are relatively easy to understand. So this is a simple version of a much more complicated assignment that you will be asked to do in your majors as you progress, as you do research here at CMU.